Hi, everyone, and welcome to a special Talking Insomnia episode where we have Charlene with us. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
I'm so glad. I'm really so thankful whenever anyone wants to share their story. So thank you so much.
Yes.
And very briefly, before I let you speak, of course, Charlene,
Mhm.
I want to say that this episode happened because you posted a couple of nice comments on the YouTube channel, and I just said, "Hey, you want to be a guest?" And you said yes. So that's why we're here
Yes.
today. And with that said, yes, do let us know a little about tell us your story.
Sure. Sure. So it feels very surreal to be here. I had started watching your channel last summer, and I remember when I was in the thick of, insomnia, um, I had, hoped to myself that maybe one day I could be a guest, and here I am. And the funny thing is, all this sort of started on April 3rd, and we're coming up on April 3rd again. So it's kind of like come full circle, and it's just like, hopefully this is like some closure for me. But um, I guess a little bit of background before I get into the whole insomnia journey is prior to having my first child, I hadn't really struggled with sleep or anything. I'd consider myself, a pretty good sleeper, never had issues. In fact, I probably was someone who dealt with more like chronic fatigue. Like I was tired all the time, and, I would just sleep for probably like 8 to 10 hours a night if I could. I never monitored anything, never had sleep anxiety or anything like that. In terms of just regular anxiety, that was something that I had always struggled with for, my entire life. But it, I developed, I think, a bit of like panic disorder like about 7 years ago. And that was when I had my first panic attack. So some anxiety issues there. But other than that, nothing really. So whenever I went into, pregnancy and I was thinking of postpartum, basically what happened to me was not something that I ever thought, was going to happen to me. But as with children, I think they're one of the biggest like sleep disruptors. So the pregnancy went pretty well. Postpartum in the beginning, it wasn't too bad to start with. However, going into like April 3rd, um, I remember the first like 8 weeks postpartum. It was still COVID. Like everywhere was shut down. There wasn't a whole lot of places that we could go, so I was home a lot. It was just me and the newborn. And I remember back then I was watching like a lot of like videos on like crime and like things that were like kind of like scary. I'm really big into crime stories and horror and stuff like that. It's just an interest of mine. So I was watching a lot of that. And I don't think in retrospect that that was probably the best idea because, you go down a rabbit hole, you see like one video, then it leads to another video, and then you see another interesting title and you're compelled to click on it. So I started watching a lot of those. And I remember on April 3rd, I don't know if this was just, being hormonal on top of, just having a new baby, but I was feeling like in particular, like pretty anxious that day. And, I did the same thing. I was the one that was just staying up with the newborn at night. We kind of did shifts. Like my husband would watch him like, for a good part of the morning. And then I would take over at night. So I was staying up late at night and I was just, watching YouTube or movies. There wasn't much to do, like I said. So that night I had like a pretty big panic attack in regards to one of the news stories I was reading. And I noticed that back then it was like one bad news story after another that I was running into on top of like all the crime videos. And they all involved children. So I had never knew what it felt like to be a mother, obviously. So now these stories had just affected me even more. So it was kind of like that night, I think what had happened was I read the story. I had what is considered like my first like intrusive thought, I guess. So I was like reading the crime story, and then I had started going down my own rabbit hole of thoughts where I was like, well, what makes somebody do this? Like what if I'm capable of doing this? What if I develop psychosis? And that's one of the biggest topics that I'll kind of get into as to why I struggled with sleep so much. I developed this huge fear of psychosis. And at the time, it's very irrational, I guess. I've noticed that like anxiety, it doesn't respond to logic. So even if you tell yourself, oh, hey, that's it's not likely, you're not going to develop psychosis. Your chances are very slim. It's very rare. It doesn't matter. It's kind of like that night, the damage was already done. It's like after I had that panic attack, I was just so scared because I started to think all these other thoughts. It was just kind of spiraling. It's like, well, what if I don't sleep well, then what if I develop psychosis then? Or, so after that night, that's why I consider kind of like April 3rd, the night that it kind of all started, because that night I developed this huge fear. So after that night, I remember the next night, like I just didn't sleep well. I was just so scared. And in the back of my mind, I kept thinking to myself, like, well, what if I snap? What if I go crazy? Because I noticed that, panic attacks for everybody, it's different. But for me, like, I mean, the sensations that kind of manifest, but for me, it kind of is like this feeling of going crazy, or this feeling of you're going to lose control, even though that's not true, but it's just how it manifests. So, I think that in the back of my mind, I still thought like there's a possibility that, I could somehow snap or something. And that's, I mean, talking about it now, it sounds so silly, but back then it was very real. And so once I started to not sleep well, I remember it was like a weekend when this had happened. And I had immediately like made an appointment with my PCP, to talk to them, my family doctor. And I had tried to join a lot of postpartum support groups. I thought at the time, like, like, oh no, like I've developed like all these things, like, so I just felt like I wanted to get help as soon as possible. So I tried to do everything that I could. So at the time, like I had said in the beginning, there was still COVID. So a lot of the support groups weren't meeting in person. So they were online. I remember being on Facebook, and I had joined a couple of groups, which I will get into. It's like a double-edged sword. It was good and very bad at the same time. So I remember I had seen my PCP, and they had wanted me to try taking like Zoloft. It's very commonly prescribed. At the time I was breastfeeding, so it's like a safer medication to be able to take while you're breastfeeding. So I started taking that, and it seemed to make everything worse. I remember like my anxiety just getting worse and worse. And as my anxiety got worse, so did my sleep. It was like I was getting maybe a couple of hours a night, and some nights nothing at all. And then I remember going on those groups, and that is where um, I had seen some comments of people saying, oh, like, because I mean, sleep issues are common among postpartum mothers. So I had seen a couple of posts of mothers like saying the same thing, I'm struggling with sleep. I can't seem to nod off. What are some things that have helped you? And of course, like it's supplements, um, some other medications, and things like a weighted blanket or meditation. Those are very, very common. But I had seen some comments saying, you have to make sure you get sleep. You need to sleep, or, you're going to develop psychosis. And there was a lot of comments like this. And when you're already kind of in a sensitized state, it makes it even worse. It's even more terrifying. So I remember seeing those comments. I had already started to spend pretty much every day just anxious. I was like afraid of my thoughts. I was afraid of not sleeping. I would think about sleep all day long, and think about all those intrusive thoughts that still scared me, about kind of like losing control. So um, when I had seen that comment, I remember it had been about like 2 days where I hadn't slept at all, and I was about to go into my third. So I remember that morning, I became like so panicked. Like I tried to go like lie down and take a nap, and I couldn't. I just remember getting all the adrenaline, and I was like, oh no, like this is something that I can't handle. I can't do this. I was like, I need to go get help now, because I had such a fear that I was gonna, once again, it's like develop psychosis or something. So I was like, what if I don't sleep for the next like couple days? I've already not slept like 3 days, So I remember going to the ER. They had given me like a crisis number. I actually had called that just to speak with someone and kind of get some direction. But they said, there isn't a whole lot we can do. And I think it was the weekend again, so it wasn't like I could follow up with like my family doctor and get help there. So I actually had gone to the ER, and I had spoken with like a psychiatrist, and it was pretty unfortunate because they couldn't really help me either. They had told me to just increase my dose of like Benadryl and Unisom, which is what I had been taking to try to sleep. And sometimes it would work, sometimes it wouldn't, which like I'll kind of get into. But I had gone home, and I remember I did increase my dose of Unisom, but like I still didn't have the education back then that I do now. So I kind of just thought it was the medication. I thought the medication was what helped me sleep, because it did knock me out. But it's because, it's like I was so tired. And I remember like in one of Martin's videos, like he talks about like sleep drive. And, I don't know if that had just been something that was like building up, and then I just kind of like knocked out. But after I had taken that, I remember I still tried to follow up with my family doctor to talk to them about medication for sleeping. And they had told me to get an appointment with a psychiatrist, but it was very difficult because they were booked up for 2 months. And that's kind of also why I went to like the ER at the time, because I was like, well, there's no immediate help. It felt like I need to sleep now. And that's kind of what I was seeing on Facebook, just repeated comments of, no, 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 you need to sleep, or it's going to get worse. Your mental health is going to get worse. So when I had the follow-up appointment with my family doctor, that's when they had given me more medications. They gave me trazodone and hydroxyzine, which is something you can take as needed. It's another like antihistamine type. But yeah, so I remember just getting to the point, like one night, I had taken the trazodone. Nothing. Like it didn't even make me sleepy. So I tried taking the hydroxyzine. So I don't recommend this to anybody, but I was in a state of panic that night. So I had taken that, nothing. And then I had taken Benadryl, and the hours ticked on. And as the hours go on, I get more panicked. And so yeah, I had taken all that and still nothing. And I was just shocked. And that's when I was like, something has to be wrong with me. And, watching a lot of your videos, I've seen a lot of people say like how many similarities we all have on, the insomnia journey. Cause I was doing the same thing where I was Googling like frantic. Like I just started trying to look at solutions, but it's all the same thing, like sleep hygiene and trying to do all these things. And which I did, I tried to limit blue light. I tried to do all this stuff, and it didn't work. And so kind of like getting to my turning point, there was a guest on one of Martin Reed's videos, and she was actually in that postpartum group. And I saw her commenting, like, she was encouraging a lot of mothers, and she was saying, like, hey, I got better. Um, and, just saying all this stuff. And so I actually like reached out to her, and, I was like, hey, like, I'm just not doing well. I can't sleep. Like, how did you recover? And I remember back then, I just wanted to get better. That's it. I just wanted to get better. I wanted to recover. It felt horrible. It was like probably like hands down one of the worst times in my life, just how I was feeling. Like if it wasn't the insomnia, it was the intrusive thoughts, and it just went back and forth. I just lived in a state of perpetual fear every day, all night. So um, whenever I had reached out to her, she had told me that she was going to be a guest on Martin Reed's video, and she sent me a bunch of links to his channel, and I started to watch his videos. And actually, he has like podcasts through like, Spotify or something. So I used to just watch his videos on the way to my job, like work. When I went back to work off of maternity leave, I had a long commute. So 1 hour to work, I'd watch his videos, and one of his podcasts, he spoke with you. So I actually found you through him. And I went and I checked out your channel. I looked at your books, and then that's when it was just like, it changed everything. It was like you and Cindy, who was the guest, she just helped me so much. She was the one that we stayed in contact. Even today, we've gotten a friendship out of this experience. Like, she's like my best friend. We've never met in person, but we talk every day. So there's so much good that can come from this experience, which I'll get to. But so then it turned into, when I would drive home from work, I'd watch your videos. And one of the most helpful things was all the guests. on even both channels, because them sharing their story when you're that afraid, I guess, and you kind of feel lost. It's like there's no hope until you start watching people who did get to the other side, or they were able to overcome this, because I think when you hear stories, of people like on the other end where it's like, oh, I've had insomnia for like 30 years, you start to think like, oh my God, like, what if that's me? Because your brain just continues to generate what if, what if, what if, what if. And it's easy to go down that spiral and be afraid. But I did get better after watching, your videos, and I just completely agree. It just came down to really, and this is like really simplifying it, but just kind of like acceptance. It came down to acceptance and learning, like education and just learning everything. That is the biggest thing that saved me, was continuing to learn and understand what was going on. It eased a lot of my fear, which I think you can't control your fear. It's going to be there, and your body kind of has to take its time to like settle down. That's something that you can't control, but you can control kind of like how you react to it. So that's why I kind of just slowly I was able to learn, and then kind of realize that it's not even really like the sleep, or it's not my thoughts that are the problem. It's kind of like how I'm treating them. It's my relationship to them. So I had to learn how to kind of befriend myself again and not fear myself, because the root of all of it was I was afraid of my thoughts. I was afraid of like things that were, like illogical, like I said. But at the time, like I said, with anxiety, it's like it doesn't really respond to logic. You can tell somebody who's afraid to maybe public speak or go on bridges, hey, like everything's okay, nothing's going to happen to you, but they're still scared. So, yeah, so that was kind of like the journey. We kind of formed a little postpartum mom group off that page. And that's where the positivity came from, is like, there's 4 of us now, and those ladies, like, we got through it together, and that's a good thing. But kind of like I said, the flip side can be there's a lot of like misinformation. There's a lot of fear that could be generated from going on there. So was it worth it? Yes, for me, coming out with those friends. But at the same time, it also was what drove me to go seek help at the hospital, So I think it's good and bad. But yeah, a lot of like me recovering though, I kind of had to also stop making recovery the focus. I had to let go. I had to stop wanting to get better so bad. The other, biggest thing is like get back out into your life. Like you don't have to focus on this all day long. Like, going back to work really helped me a lot. Going out and living life despite how I felt. Like I could feel terrible, and it's like it doesn't matter. Like I had to go out and live life. I had to kind of train my body. Like even though you feel this way, it's okay. Like you can still live your life. And that's what a lot of the acceptance is. It's not trying to get rid of it. It's not trying to not feel fear and not feel certain things. It's living your life despite how you feel, So I could feel afraid, and it's okay. Like I kind of had to tell myself, like, who cares? Like fear is not going to hurt me. It's just an emotion. And so I kind of like, just recognize that. And one of your guests that really resonated with me, his name was Andreas. I think you had talked to him, and how he had such a big change, like a spiritual journey. I agree. I think, it really was. Today, I just feel, you know, I'm not the same person I was before all of this happened, but I'm better, I'm stronger. And this experience has really just been life changing. I saw recently you also spoke with Sean, same thing. And you guys were talking about like how this journey just really, when you look back at it, it's almost like it was worth it. It just really changes you for the better. And so I
Oh,
will say one more thing. So
yeah.
this month, it's not to say, to whoever will be watching, it's not to say that I still don't get triggered or anything like that, or I still don't have bad nights, because that's the other thing. Your goal isn't to um, get rid of bad nights or sleep perfect all the time. That's not reality. And, normal sleepers don't have that either. But this past month, it's like, I don't know. I think it, if something had triggered me, probably talking to other mothers that were struggling. And it's like this whole month I didn't really sleep well. It's probably like 2 hours here or there, and I just like couldn't sleep. But I just let it be, and it just kind of corrects itself. It's interesting. It's like, anxiety and just like sleep disorders, or they kind of can fix themselves, depending on the situation. But yeah, so it was like the last thing I wanted to add was fixing my insomnia this way, or my sleep or whatever. It kind of crosses over into how I healed from everything else. And, that's what Andrea says. They're all like tied together. Like that's how I actually got better from my intrusive thoughts too. It was like I started to not fear them as much anymore because I just kind of let them be there. And I was like, well, I'm just going to let go because it's hard to fight. Like it's exhausting to have to be afraid and fight every day and try to get rid of them. It's like the best analogy I could come up with for this was it's like trying to let yourself fall backwards, and there are people behind you, and they're saying it's going to be okay. And these people kind of represent people like you and Cindy. And, they're like, no, like, I promise it's fine. Just let go. And you can't turn around and look though, to make sure. It's like, you have to just kind of trust yourself, trust your body. And then you fall back and it's okay. And that's kind of like what it felt like to me. It was like, I had to just like let go. And I think, your channel and all these people, they're kind of like the hope that some of us need. We need to just see, hey, like it's okay. Cause I felt like back then I was at rock bottom, and it's like when you're there, the only way's up, you know? So
Wow, this is a yeah. Thanks so much for sharing this, Charlene. And I think it's the first time ever. I just kind of glanced at the clock, and we were 20 minutes in, and I haven't said anything. You just told the story so wonderfully well. I have to ask you, did you kind of prepare, or did you just
not at all.
come to?
No, no, I actually didn't, because I didn't want it to seem rehearsed. I wanted to be as natural as possible. But I will say, throughout the year, I've talked about the story a lot because we have tried to help other mothers, like me and Cindy. We're kind of like a team. We tried to help these other mothers. And every time we see somebody struggling, we would kind of like reach out to them because we knew how it felt. We had kind of like shared trauma, I guess. She went through a lot of like what I went through, a lot of similarities in our stories. And both of us being postpartum, I think her child's only 4 months older than mine. So she was like right ahead of me. I was right behind her, and she kind of just led the way. And then we learned all this together, and we still continue to learn. So I wouldn't say like the journey like really ends. You just keep learning. But yeah, I've shared my story a lot. And of course, like I said,
Yeah, no, okay, so yeah, that makes sense. And yeah,
yeah,
I want to just say the immediate thing I just want to add here is that it's wonderful to hear that you created this group, and how I believe this is how change will happen on sort of like on a big scale. Is like some people like
yeah,
yourself, you help somebody else and they have this kind of transformation. They help somebody else, and I think that's how change is going to happen. But yeah, just a few more things that I thought could be helpful to dive into. And one of them was you mentioned that just kind of hope from hearing other people's stories was really helpful, and also just
yes,
education. And one big part of like education was, I think, what you said about like we can't kind of fight our thoughts or escape them. When we let them be, things get calmer. Can you mention other things like educational things that were helpful to you?
yeah. I'll have to think about that, because it was just so much. So many things were super helpful to me. And kind of like I said, like the main thing was like the acceptance. But I think like people kind of get confused about acceptance because they think it's um, like not being afraid of it anymore, or trying to get rid of something. And I think educationally I had to learn that it's not about like getting rid of it. Like recovery isn't about like the absence of, it's learning to, I guess, essentially live with it. But it's not as bad as you think, because I remember back then I would see that and I'm like, well, how am I supposed to live with this? It's painful, it's like suffering. And it kind of goes through, like, it's not just insomnia, it's like the intrusive thoughts and all that stuff. That's kind of painful to live with too. It's repeated thoughts that you don't really like or want to have that just kind of keep coming back. And so something that really helped was to just like there's something called a dare. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. It's by like
Charlene. Yep.
Barry McDonough. Yeah, I had found his app and his book also. I was reading that, and it kind of aligns to a lot of like, what you share on your channel too. But the DARE stands for, it's like diffuse, accept or allow, run towards, or and engage. So basically you have like, a thought or something that makes you anxious, you kind of diffuse it. You're just like, who cares? So what? And then the engage, or the accept and allow is obvious. You just kind of let it be there if it's still there. And then running towards is kind of just saying like, okay, well, if you're not going to go away, give me more. And that's kind of like the brave step of it. And that's the other thing, with bravery, it's like, it's not the absence of fear, it's be feeling scared and still doing it. So that was like the thing. It's just, you still just had to kind of be there. I had a lot of like avoidance behavior where I would kind of do a lot of like reassurance seeking, or I would avoid triggers, or avoid this, or avoid drinking coffee, or a blue light. But I don't think it's really like the avoidance of triggers that's going to help you. In fact, it's almost like you have to be brave and put yourself in it. You have to, and you have to sit in it, because the more you're willing to do that, the more it kind of fades away. It's like your brain. I remember you talking about this. Like sometimes it's like, your brain gets like scared, and so it's kind of just like, it's not something that responds to anything that you can tell. You can just be like, okay, just don't be afraid. Back to what I was saying in the beginning. So the only thing that works is like almost just like exposing yourself to it. So in regards to sleep, like, I was scared for days. It's not like I was like, oh, I just accept and that's it. It's over. I learned what I needed to do. No, it took days, weeks, months, and like I said, this last month, like I was re-triggered, but no, I mean, I went to bed and I still felt anxiety for days. And, nights would go on. I'd still have a night where like I didn't sleep at all. And like, of course, the anxiety's there. But what I now call it is practice. You have to practice. Like you can never get better at anything if you don't practice. So now anytime I feel anxious, it kind of makes me feel better, because I just say this is my chance to practice. Because if I don't have anxiety, then I'm not going to be able to get better at having it, if that makes sense. So um, that helped a lot.
Makes so much sense. Total
Yeah.
sense. And now another question I just came to mind. I just had to ask you this one because you made me smile when I saw your name on YouTube,
Yeah.
Charmander. I was like, "Are you a Pokemon fan?"
Yeah. That's where that reference alludes to. Yeah.
All right, very cool. Yeah, my kids are big into that and all the
Yeah.
evolutions of Charmander. But okay, and well, yeah, I want to ask you also about the trazodone, the Benadryl, all that. What happened to all the medications?
Okay, yeah, I kind of glossed over that. So, yeah, after that night, I had taken, the several different medications, and it didn't work. I remember for about like a month or two, I was like still too afraid to let them completely go, So I kind of was having nights where I'd get some sleep a night or two, and then maybe no sleep, and then some sleep a night or two. It kind of just kept going in that cycle. And I remember like the nights that I was still very anxious, I mainly was relying on like Unisom. And because tended to work better for me than Benadryl. And so like I was using that for a while, and I said, I'm done with, any of the prescription medications. I'm not taking anything. And then I kind of started to gain a little bit more confidence as time went on, just from watching guests and seeing them let go, and, saying that there's this hope that I can get better if I just also try to let go, and that's the thing. I don't think you try to do anything. You just let it be. And so, I was one night, I think I just told myself, I was like, I'm just going to get off all meds now. I'm done. Because when I finally had gotten in to see a psychiatrist, which was after about a month, whenever I had gotten the trazodone and all that, they, of course, wanted to do other medications, and they had prescribed me Remeron or mirtazapine. And, that when I had tried that, it was the most sedating thing like I've tried for me personally. And I remember those were the two things that I had, I guess. And it's kind of like a safety behavior, kind of like when someone with maybe panic attacks keeps like Ativan or Xanax, in their purse or something, or in their bag. So I had those, and I was like, if I can't sleep, I have these. But I think what happened was I realized when I would take those medications, like the next day, I'd feel so groggy and terrible that it got to a point where I was like, what's the difference between this and me not sleeping at all? Like, I feel kind of the same. I feel not that great. So I was like, I'm done. I'm like, you know what? Whatever happens, happens. I'm not taking anything. I'm not doing anything. And a lot of this, was like, like I said, I continued to watch your videos and I was still talking to Cindy and she was also like, no, like there's nothing you have to do. Like there's nothing you have to fix because there's not really like a real problem. It's just, it's all like our thoughts and like what we're thinking. But yeah, so then I didn't take them. And then I just let my nights be. Like nights aren't bad or good. They're just nights. And so I kind of just, yeah, and I just existed. And then, I kind of tried to do what you had mentioned in a video too. So this is another thing I guess that may help education wise is like befriending wakefulness. It's like if you can't sleep, there's like things you can do. But I thought that, I preferred kind of your perspective and your channel, over Martin's, which he was very helpful, but a lot of his stuff, it's very like with like the like sleep restriction and all that. It almost seems like there's like rules, and I kind of don't like that. I don't think that there should be really like rules, or you shouldn't try to do something to sleep. You kind of just like let everything be. And so, yeah, and that it works the best. Because what happened was over time, I started to like lower my anxiety. And this is something very important that I think I should share is when it comes to recovery, it's not like an up and up and up and up thing. You don't just get better and get better and get better. It's like, no, like you get a little bit better and then something happens and, it's bad again, and then it gets better and then bad again and better. But it's never as like bad as it was in the beginning. Kind of like how when I got re-triggered this past month, it's not like the low of the beginning, but I mean, it's a little bit, I guess they call them setbacks, but I don't even like to call them that really. It's just, things happen, and then you just kind of let it be and move on.
Speed bumps. That's
Yeah,
my
yeah.
version of them because it's like I same thing. It's not really a setback. It's just yeah. Anyway, super helpful to hear this, Charlie. And um, a couple of things I want to add was I I think that you know uh, me and Martin, we both started off with like kind of rigid like CBT-I, and then I think
Yes.
I've developed much more into kind of the ACT, DARE, NATO, like that space, and I think
Yeah.
Martin has too. If you look at his more like recent posts, he talks
Uh-huh.
much more about letting go. So Martin, if you hear this, we should talk soon. I want to do an episode of Martin, see where he's at, but.
Yeah.
Also on the same topic, like I just was so happy to hear what you shared because I remember long time ago, this was probably like 2 years ago, and I
Mhm.
had this idea that it would be so wonderful to have guests like you, like sharing their story for the community, for everyone else. And I remember telling Martin, like, hey, Martin, you have so many clients. Maybe you can talk to them and make a podcast out of that. And I don't know if maybe he already had the idea. I can't remember. I'm not going to like take credit for him
Yeah.
starting his podcast, but I remember him telling me back, like, hey, Daniel, I'm going to start a podcast and it's going to be focused on like all like success stories. And I was like, that's amazing. And
Yes.
just hearing you say that you listen to his podcast and you listen to my podcast and this is kind of happening, this the dream happened, like it's just
Mhm.
wonderful. So just so
Yes,
glad to
and
hear that.
like I said, that was one of the best things because there's not a whole lot of that, even on like the pages that you come across when you are scared, it's a lot of like negative stuff or people who didn't recover. And I've noticed, on these groups, just even specifically for the postpartum stuff, it's like people who get better don't go back and comment. They kind of leave the group and move on with their life. And it's more people struggling, and they all struggle together. So it's like you see a lot of negative stuff. And when you're struggling yourself, it's not very helpful. It's just, and so all these positive stories and positive videos, I actually had to kind of just keep it to that. At the time, I guess it's a little bit of avoidance, but it really did help me. I just like, I didn't want to look at any of the bad stuff. I had to kind of like leave those groups and then just only watch positive videos. And then over time, yeah, it got better just because you're also learning in those videos too, kind of like what helped and what worked. But when you mentioned kind of like the ACT and CBT, or yeah, CBT, I remember I didn't mention this in the beginning either, but I was seeing a therapist too, and I think CBT is very like mainstream. It's like something that most therapists do, and that was like her specialty. So she did a lot of that with me, and it was okay. It kind of helped to see the logical perspective of it. You know, whenever I had fears of sleep or fears of certain thoughts, she kind of was like, okay, well, let's like see the evidence for this and let's kind of like argue it. But then it turned into, I feel like I'm arguing with my thoughts and it just really wasn't working. And then she was kind of going into like thought stopping, where if a thought came up, she's like, you should just say stop. And I'm like, it just wasn't very helpful. And so I was with her for a little while and it helped to talk to somebody. But yeah, I think cognitive behavioral therapy can help to a certain extent. But
Yeah, it's exactly how I feel about it. That the whole idea that we are not our thoughts, we can kind of examine our thoughts and look at them, and I think that's helpful to kind of distance ourselves from our thoughts. But then when we start getting into like, okay, so how can I control my thoughts then? How can I? That's when I think it can get really tricky. Maybe it helps for some
yeah.
people, but yeah, it can be exactly what you said. You try to stop it, it just kind of comes back stronger. So
Yeah, and that's what I had learned, especially with like intrusive thoughts. The more you fight it, the more you try to not have these thoughts, the more you try to get rid of them, the more they come back. It becomes like sticky.
yes,
So yeah, it just wasn't very helpful. And once again, I think it turned into, I realized I had to kind of just like change my relationship with them. I had to realize like, what is really like so bad about having this? Like, it's not really harming me. Like I can still live my life. And at the time it was very stressful because I was actually in grad school. I went back to work full time. And then I was dealing with a newborn and it was a lot going on and trying to do all those things while having these thoughts and having this fear. And what if I don't sleep? How will I function? It's like those thoughts were firing like all day long, but like, it's just proof to everybody else you can do this. Like you absolutely can live your life because even I graduated and, this fall I took boards and I got zero sleep and I passed it. And like, they gave me 3 hours and I did it in like 60 minutes or so, an hour, and it's like, it's possible. Like there's so much you can do. It's just like a message of hope. Like, no matter what you're going through or, where you are in the world, if you're struggling with this, like you can do it. It doesn't matter who you are. I think that all these like disorders that they say, you can recover from them. In fact, it's like it's changed my perspective so much. I don't really live under the label of like anxiety or like, having intrusive thoughts or insomnia anymore. I think that if you don't care about it and you don't really like struggle with it anymore, is it really like a disorder? It's kind of, once again, like you always say, it's not medical advice or anything, but it's just kind of, just a thought for me. I don't have to live under that label anymore. I think anxiety is an emotion and, there's nothing wrong with feeling fear or sadness. Sometimes you kind of cut the suffering a little bit whenever you're not fighting it. Like it's still going to be there, but now you're not struggling to not have it. I've just become more accepting of having like all feelings now. So
it's amazing, so wonderful to hear. And I actually just have one more question. You said
sure.
everything so nicely, so well, and it's become kind of my standard last question, which is that if you could talk to yourself back in April or when this was really when you were really in the thick of it, like
Mhm.
what would you tell yourself?
I would tell myself that, when I found you and Martin, and I was talking to Cindy, that, I was on the right track, that there is hope. All these recovery stories, they're real and it's possible for you too. You can recover. And this is kind of my message for everybody. You definitely can recover. Like I said, it doesn't matter how long you've even struggled with this. I am fully believe you can get better. And then I would just encourage myself to continue learning, even as I am now. And that's just all a part of like the journey. And, so I know it's pretty simple, but
No, it's
I feel
super,
like I've
super
said a lot.
nice. Charlene, I want to thank you so much for being here, and yeah, just thanks again, and be in touch. All right.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye now.